supply part of demand and supply part of inventory management and the supply chain, and the overall consumer behavior has also changed. With the outstanding minds we have in the panel discussion today, let's delve further to benefit from the experience of our panelists who will be discussing on the topic Resilience to Resurgence, the post-pandemic strategy. Now, I would like to take the privilege to invite our panelists to join us on the stage. Firstly, welcoming Mr. Ravneet Gill, sports education and sports entrepreneur, former CEO, Deutsche Bank and Yes Bank, who is joining us virtually. We welcome you, sir.
Delighted to be here.
Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Abhay Parnerkar, Chief Executive Officer at Godrej Tyson Foods Limited. Next, we look forward to the presence of Mr. Jayen Mehta, COO, Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation. With equal privilege, I welcome Mr. Prashant Shukla, Head of Supply Chain, Rocket. May I request the presence of the moderator of the session, Professor Satyendra C Pandey from IRMA, to join us on stage. Thank you, everyone. I request the audience to welcome all the panelists and the dignitaries with a huge round of applause. Flowers are a way to express our gratitude and our love towards the ones present within us. So I request Professor Satyendra Pandey to welcome our guest with a bouquet. Momentum. I'll get it. Thank you, sir. Moving forward, I would like to invite Professor Satyendra Pandey to the dais to initiate the proceedings of the session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sarthak, for inviting us on the dais here. We have talked about the phygital world in the morning, while Professor Sahib was talking about how the world has changed and how it is likely to be in the future. So on that note, and also the fog of uncertainty that we usually refer to while we are talking about strategy is something which is still around. That fog of uncertainty hasn't gone. So with that pretext, when we are talking about resilience to resurgence, I think it is an opportune moment for me to introduce four of the panel members present over here. I will start with Mr. Ravneet Gill and introducing the panel members to you all here. Mr. Ravneet Gill is one of India's most senior bankers, having been the Managing Director and CEO of Deutsche Bank and Yes Bank across a career spanning 34 years. He was also part of Deutsche Bank Asia Pacific Board and an elected member of the Management Committee of the Indian Banks Association. In 2020, around pandemic time, he founded New Horizons Alliance, a digitally enabled new age company which is involved in the business of advanced sports and sports education and gaming. Mr. Gill was recently nominated to CII's National Committee on Sports. We welcome you, Mr. Gill, to the panel discussion, to the CXO panel.
Thank you very much, and delighted to be here. And my apologies that I couldn't be there in person, but very much looking forward to being part of the panel.
Thank you. I also introduced to you Mr. Jayen Mehta. Mr. Mehta is COO at Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation Limited, AMUL, which is India's largest food products marketing organization with annual brand sales turnover of rupees 61,000 crores. AMUL is a cooperative federation of 3.6 million milk producers of Gujarat organized under 18,600 village dairy cooperative societies and handling more than 10 billion liters of milk every year. It is Asia's largest dairy company and ranked 8th largest in the world. Mr. Mehta has been associated with AMUL since last 32 years. He has rich experience in domestic and international marketing of AMUL products, having traveled widely across India and 50 countries around the world. He has a good understanding of brand building, product management, exports, advertising and media, corporate planning, sales and distribution, supply chain management, and social media. He's a member on the Standing Committee of Marketing of the International Dairy Federation. He's also a member of Confederation of Indian Industry Committee on International Trade Policy. He has served as a member on the Global Dairy Trade Events Oversight Board. He has also been awarded the Marketing Man of the Year to 2018 awards by Ahmedabad Management Association and ranks among the top CMOs of India as rated by several industry bodies and publications. Mr. Mehta is a graduate in Business Administration with University Gold Medal from Sardar Patel University, Vallabh Vidyanagar, Gujarat, and has done his postgraduate in Rural Management from IRMA, 10th batch PRM 10, 89-91 as batch topper in marketing. We welcome you, sir, to the CXO panel. We have also with us Mr. Abhay Parnerkar, who is CEO of Godrej Tyson Foods Limited. In a diverse career spanning over 2 decades, he has lived in 3 continents and worked across multiple functions: sales, distribution, accounts management, marketing, business development, and M&A. He spent close to 18 years at the Coca-Cola company, and in the last role, he was heading Coca-Cola's business for diverse markets in Southeast Europe. He started his professional career at Dabur Foods and has also been an entrepreneur where he co-founded and led a beverage startup for 3 years, a time he considers to be one of his biggest learning experiences. We would love to hear those experiences here in the panel as well. He's a mechanical engineer and completed his MBA from JBIMS. Mr. Parnerkar is passionate about traveling and reading and considers them the best way to learn about people, cultures, economies, and socio-politics. He has traveled to more than 60 countries so far and is aiming to complete a century in coming years. We wish that to happen very soon. I have also with me Mr. Prashant Shukla. Mr. Shukla is the head of supply chain, procurement, and customer care at Roque India. Roque is a 80-year-old 4.3 billion euro French MNC operating in 100 countries, offering best of nature products across the globe, with 21 plants across the world. Roque is a world leader in manufacturing products for food, pharma, biopharma, animal nutrition, plant-based and protein industries. In his current role, Mr. Shukla is responsible for shaping vision and strategy for India business. As a member of India leadership, he is leading end-to-end supply chain, procurement, logistics and operations strategy. He comes with over 25 years of experience in managing end-to-end supply chain operations with Coca-Cola India, Ashok Leyland and several packaging majors. To his credit, he has been the country's largest buyer of agriculture, horticulture commodities. He has been instrumental in leading several back-end integration projects and partnerships with stakeholders across the value chain. Mr. Shukla has an industrial production engineering degree with Masters in Business Administration. We welcome you, sir, all of you to the panel. Huge round of applause to all the panel members. We have been talking about strategy for a while, and Dr. Sodhi talked about the strategy which has been long lasting, something which has been through the test of time and has stayed relevant for more than 7 decades, more than 6 decades. So that's the kind of strategy that we have also heard about in the inaugural address. Now, over past 2 years, since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and as the lockdown was announced in the country as well, we have witnessed several kind of changes, and also some of the coping mechanisms which companies across the industries have adopted in terms of how they are going to be responding to it, and also how to overcome some of these uncertainties which we are referring to here now. I would want to understand from the panel members here that when it comes to specifically to your industry, how badly did the pandemic hit you? So in certain cases, it was also an opportunity. So for instance, what Dr. Sodhi was referring to in the morning, that it also presented certain kind of opportunities to us. While in case of Godrej Tyson, I'm pretty sure that it presented more challenges than opportunities to you. So I would like to understand that how badly this did the pandemic affect the business, and how has the recovery been? So what is your part to recovery over past 2 years, and what are those coping mechanisms and strategies that you adopted? I will invite Mr. Gill first to start. Maybe he can talk about banking industry first, and then the new venture that he has founded, and subsequently we'll pass it on to the rest of the speakers. About 5 minutes to each of the panel members to express their first initial thoughts about this, and then we'll take over from there.
Sure. Thank you for that. So I think, one of the things which needs to be also noted is that the pandemic didn't impact the economy as a whole in a uniform fashion. So there were sectors like hospitality, travel, which obviously took a very big hit. And then there were other sectors which are more tech-enabled, which were more online, content-driven, which obviously, benefited a lot from this, pandemic. If I talk about it briefly from a banking standpoint, the irony of the whole situation is that banks tend to make a lot of money when there is volatility. Business models were changing. It had a impact on foreign exchange. It had an impact on interest rates, etc. As banks, the central bank started to tighten, and that gave banks a big opportunity to make actually supernormal profits from treasury operations. Obviously, it impacted certain businesses and industries, and that impact on the bank balance sheets will be felt sometime from now, in terms of what the casualties were, mortalities that occurred in certain industries, and which will show up as in the form of NPAs, etc. I think what it also did from a business standpoint was that businesses which were being funded a lot by private equity certainly started to feel a squeeze. So earlier, I think everybody was very, very gung-ho in terms of startups and not worrying about profitability, etc. But suddenly, everybody was talking about path to profitability. Everybody was talking about cash flows. And suddenly we started to see that many of the startups which were really the flavor of the season started to suffer from lack of liquidity or funding. That was from a financial services lens, and I'm sure my fellow panelists will have a lot more to say on other businesses. Let me take this opportunity to talk about what happened in the world of sport, in the world of esports. Many of you, I'm sure, in the audience are gamers, and you must have, run headlong into your parents in terms of the reservations that they have with respect to gaming. And the general feeling is that, gaming leads to people, youngsters becoming addiction, etc. But the truth is that, esports is not just about sport or a distraction. Esports or gaming is, effectively speaking, one of the biggest cultural megatrends that humanity has ever known. I will provide just one data point for you to be able to understand the enormity of that change. The world's most popular sport is football. Worldwide, 330 million people play football, and about 3.5 billion people watch football. The second most popular sport in the world is cricket. About 220 million people play cricket, and 2.5 billion people watch cricket. In the case of gaming, the gamers themselves are seeing that, it's a completely reverse of what happened in traditional sport. Um, and to think that people got into gaming because there was nothing better to do, everybody was locked down. I don't think it's actually correct. WHO in fact said that they really shudder to think what would have happened to the younger generation on the back of the lockdown, where you could not go to clubs, theaters, restaurants, meet your friends, but for the fact that there was gaming. So the amount of data science, data analytics, web designing, coding, etc., that gaming also exposes you to is a great learning. And the final point I'll make is that don't look at it only from the lens of sport. It is also in many ways expression of Gen Z. Gen Z is a very experiential generation. And when you talk about being experiential, the basis of that has to be participation. So Gen Z likes to participate rather than consume content, passively. And that's the other reason why 91% of Gen Z worldwide engages in gaming. The reason I thought I'll focus on this really was because obviously this is not mainstream. In our thinking, when we talk about impact of pandemic, we talk about economic impact of what happened as on the back of the lockdown, dislocation in markets, etc. But if there is one big trend, one big theme which is sweeping across the world, which will have a massive impact on culture, on learning, on sport, is actually gaming. And I think it's absolutely imperative for each one of us to take a step back and see that do we need to relook at gaming from a slightly different lens than the very prejudiced lens that at least my generation and the generation after me has traditionally looked at it. So that I would say has been the biggest change that has come on the back of the pandemic in the world of sport, in the world of esport, and there's a big crossover happening between the two of them. And I see that as continuing in the future. Everybody talks about the metaverse. The simplest definition of metaverse is, how do you move from the digital world, from the real world into the digital world? And that pipe that helps you, traverse that journey is gamification. And I don't think that one can understand gamification any better than if you went through the route of gaming. So that I would say is my take on the single biggest change that has occurred on the back of the pandemic, and I think it'll have massive monetization opportunities, and it'll impact many sectors of the economy and content going forward.
Yep. Mr. Shukla, next thoughts from your end in terms of how the industry in which you are operating, how did the pandemic affect it, and what has been your part to recovery?
Thanks, Professor. So we are basically a B2B, very manufacturing-based industry, and when the pandemic hit and the lockdown was announced, our business plan for that month became zero. We didn't know what to do. Somebody talked about uncertainties, and these uncertainties are not today. They are actually constant. They are there. Just the degree varies. How your response time should be to those uncertainties define how matured you as an organization are, and how well defined planning, thoughtfulness you have had during the right times, so that you are prepared to do a right thing. So we decided, and Dr. Sodhi also talked about this, touched upon this one as well, that it's communication. So what we decided is that we needed a response time, and we had everybody in the value chain to be affected. So we defined our key stakeholders, so we had to talk to our customers at one side because they were also badly hit, like us. Some of them were in the essential category areas which had to run. We supply food ingredients for food, biopharma, pharma, nutraceuticals, and related industries, proteins, fibers. So all goes to food, largely, consumables. We said that let's talk to our customers and understand their requirements because we have inventory and now inventory has become all of a sudden very precious. So we communicated with them. We figured out that, so we also made a task force, COVID task force, to take care of people's health, that there has to be some action planning on that area because that became critical. So there was one business side which we had to handle, and then there is people side which we had to handle, how to keep people safe. We said that, okay, by talking to our customers, which are like 2,000 in numbers, we spoke to most of them, we reached out to them, we said that what is your problem and how do you want us to service you. That understanding itself was very, very important because they were also clueless, we were also clueless. So we were thinking what to do, right? We were very good prepared and we had a zeal or a inner strength to support our customers in these bad times. So we became part of that essential area where we were allowed to operate. We said that, we set ourselves a target that, okay, what we will do is we need a one person to have a good visibility on planning, production, and customer. There were different departments earlier, right? So we said that, okay, we will club these for next 2 years to say that only one person should have visibility of these all three areas so that he is able to decide or maneuver the organization the way our organization needs a direction on. After talking to our customers, looking at our inventory levels, we set a target for ourselves that in 1 month, we will reach to 25% of our capacity. In second month, we will reach to 50%. In fourth month, we will reach to 75%. And in fifth month, we will reach to 100% of our capacity. So this is the target which we set for ourselves by talking to customers. And then came administrative hassles that how a truck first of all would come to our factory. Then how will we handle COVID-related issues, infections, and all of that within the factory premises so that it does not spread within the factory? Then how can our products be safe, untouched by human, and loaded onto the truck? And then the whole journey of truck, which used to happen in 3 to 5, 7 days, how it will happen during the course of that, because there are hundreds of scrutinies will happen, documentation will be checked, people will stop you at the borders. So all of that had to be also arranged. So we started creating that visibility, and the 4 months target which I am talking to you to have a full normalization of our plants running was considering these facts that, you know, our action will and the momentum will gain maturity and we will become more efficient in that. So we did that exercise and we started connecting with customers and started a very simple exercise of dispatching 1 truck, 2 trucks, 3 trucks, and 100 trucks and 200 trucks. It just kept becoming brick by brick more complicated. But in order to move the organization, and I was talking to somebody, people talk strategy. So we need to define the purpose first, that how and what will organization do. You know, there was a planning strategy, there was procurement strategy, there was logistics strategy. In that there was HR strategy, there were plant management because it comes under manufacturing, so there was plant strategy. Plant was getting scrutinized by external forces, so there was public affairs and communications strategy. And customer is just lost. So we need to create just one strategy that we will dispatch. It's as simple as that. And we started doing that activity with zero defect from day zero. we created an operations team who will manage this entire operation. So you all know that there is a forecasting cycle, there is a way in which SNOP plans are working, otherwise, gets reviewed every month. We created an operations team who will meet every day at 11 o'clock. There were 26 people we identified that, and they were all people who are in the mid bracket who actually impact the organization the most. And they were told, just don't worry about anything, find solution. Don't worry about problems because everybody knows the problems, everybody is getting impacted. Can we start identifying solutions rather than problems? And let me tell you, successfully we have been able to reach to 100% capacity utilization. All our plants ran, not even a single day shutdown. All the plants came running. We created a people side I talked about, right? Because people were doing this, and I had a privilege, or at least this, out of this 26 people, it was a privilege for some of us to be working from home. But people at plants, they have to be physically there. They were sacrificing, they were taking risk in order to serve. So that feeling that we are servicing, there has to be a purpose, right? Running a plant is everyday affair. But right now you are serving communities, because if I don't supply one material and Parle plant stops, or some other Nestle plant stops, if there is a shortage of Maggi or Parle biscuit, which a common man at roadside, he's just looking for that. That feeling itself gave us a lot of motivation to keep working on it. These 26 people delivered it. We created a whole lot of ecosystem within our plants. Temporary tents, conference rooms were converted into sleeping rooms. We created a hospital within our facility, how to cordon off people. So we are a French company, so we are finicky about safety. So definitely nobody cared like French care about the work-life balance. So, and it is so heartening to see that people didn't go home where their families also were at risk, and all of us know that there were difficulties of essential commodities at even our homes, right? Everybody's home was stocked out of essentials, but their family members were kind of managing, leaving this person to manage the plant. So I think, in my opinion, the entire supply chain works on zeal, on softer aspects. Functional aspects come only to second. Digitalization comes as enabling environment in order to reach contactless. And I think we created that this whole last 2 years to strengthen our organization's processes, strengthen business continuity plans, strengthen digitization, creating efficiency. So we created a lot of opportunity areas and reduced cost. And when we come to next session, I will start from here, that how creating that efficiency is now helping us to tide through the difficult environment which we are in and we are going to be in for some more time. I'll rest my case at here and then.
Thank you. Thank you. Those were wonderful first thoughts, initial thoughts. And some of this can also act as a nice fodder for scholars in strategy area who are thinking about unified strategy versus the functional strategy, these kind of things. So some of this might also trigger some research during when we are especially talking about difficult times and response during uncertainties. I would now like to invite Mr. Parnerkar to talk about what were the challenges that you faced during the pandemic and how has the recovery been?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. In fact, first of all, thanks for having me here, especially since I represent a business which is Godrej Tyson, which is part of Godrej Agrovet, an agri-business of which many of your institutes, pass outs, they work in that organization. So it's a great privilege to be here. You know, and I heard, like, for example, when Mr. Gill also said, whenever we talk about the industries most impacted by COVID, I think the industries typically, which ones come to our mind, right? Hospitality, airlines. But actually, surprisingly, the industry I represent, which is in the, you know, processed chicken, poultry business, the impact was felt the first, as in the business, in fact, even in February and March, and it was a very, very strong impact on the business in terms of, because it's a livestock industry, what was happening out there, there were, and it's a commodity business, so there was a lot of negative, adverse news out there. And overnight, the prices collapsed. The industry in 2 months wiped out probably many, many months of the full year of profits as an industry. So very strong impact that happened in the first 2 months of this thing. Since subsequently, and to kind of echo what Prashant here also talked about, you know, and thanks to the courage of the people who were, so I have joined the business recently, so I can only talk about it, but I know of people who were part of that whole process of then starting the recovery from that very, very low base that was created. And slowly, you know, the industry kind of, after that first impact, there was a period of recovery. The restaurants, food service business kind of completely, it reduced in size dramatically. But then there was a demand which started to shift from consumers because they were all in home. They wanted some convenience options from in foods. They couldn't order from our value-added products in the frozen foods business. And again, as I said, the team kind of rallied behind and created that supply chain to make sure that the products through e-commerce, through home deliveries, started to reach the consumer. Subsequently, as many months passed by, it has definitely resulted in some very, you know, permanent sort of effects as well. The industry structure overall in the processed foods business has changed. E-commerce now is a very strong part of, because especially since some of these food categories also, you know, cater to a slightly urban and upmarket consumers. So that has also now moved significantly, as in the industry and channel structure has changed for us, and we've had to adapt to that. And this has happened across industry. And now I think what we also see actually as branded and packaged foods business, as somebody who represents a company which is driven by the consumer's need for convenience, of hygiene, of quality, which a brand like ours can provide. But it has also led to certain fundamental shifts in consumer behavior, in their shopping behavior, in the channel structure. And again, some of those things we could talk about as we go along.
Thank you, Mr. Parnerkar. I think stronger than before, that is something that we can say, stronger than before. Yeah. Now from chicken, poultry, livestock to milch animals, I invite Mr. Jayen Mehta to speak about how did the industry face the hit from pandemic, and how has the recovery been? If you can throw some light on that.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Pandey. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Professor Modi and IRMA and the SMF to invite me here. And since I'm an IRMA alum, I'm pretty nervous being here, and especially to sit in presence of our faculty members, as much as my batchmate from IRMA, Biru, has come from USA, a professor there, and to talk about the pandemic, which of course is real. It affected all of us. We lost our, many of us lost our friends, colleagues, relatives. So it was a tough time for the entire country and the world all put together. But being from IRMA, what you do when you are faced with this situation, and where do you go for the inspiration? And I'll quote Dr. Kurian in this particular case, because this is where it is published in his book, a quote which says that in every crisis, if you look carefully, you will spot an opportunity. He said further that my insistence on finding and seizing that opportunity had often been a source of annoyance for many of our colleagues, because it means that unlike most people, I never tried to sidestep a crisis. Rather, the more monstrous the crisis, the more I am tempted to rush at it, grasp at it by the horns, and maneuver it till it gives me what I want. So this is where the initial inspiration and the learning came from. That when we realized that as an Amul dairy cooperative system working with 300 lakh liters of milk every day, which is serviced through our 80 branch offices to 10,000 distributors and 1 million retail outlets and perhaps 1 billion consumers, you can't be sitting and waiting for what's going to happen. So we had to literally take the bull by the horns. There was no actual option also. Because here, if you waste 300 lakh liters of milk, it is a loss of income of 150 crore rupees every day to the farmer. Because the cow doesn't stop producing milk because there is a pandemic in the world. So we had to see that our systems and processes are in place. And with the right kind of protocols, ensuring that safety right from our farmer to the members of the village cooperative society, to the tanker drivers who operate the milk, bring them to the plants, the people at the plant work continuously. I'm happy that along with my colleague Zambalia from Amul Fed Dairy, many of our colleagues from different member unions also sitting because they are part of the PGPX program here. Each one of them worked day in and out and ensured that milk in package form is available to consumers across the country, and not just milk, but the entire range of Amul products is available across the length and breadth of the countries. So we are talking of thousands of people literally working day in, day out. The crisis was there. It was spreading across the country. I mean, phase 1, phase 2. I mean, we know all what happened during these things. But despite all this, the supply chain continued uninterrupted. Because in the market, if milk is not there, you can imagine what chaos it has in our lives. And we all are used to fresh milk, and that too supplied every day morning at our doorstep or near our houses. And that's where we had to see that the entire ecosystem is working. And that's where you need to build in the trust and confidence of all members of the supply chain for our customers that Amul will be available. So the pillar of communication which Odisha talked this morning, that was very, very important part, as much as keeping this entire supply chain intact. And here, which means thousands of tanker drivers to thousands of distributors and retailers also working uninterrupted. Now the protocols were in place, the guidelines were in place, the blockages were in place. And the material had to also come in with other ingredients, the packing material, the issues related to supply chain. So there was almost a day-to-day coordination with the Home Ministry in Delhi. We used to send a list of all our vendors, our partners, and if the barrels have to come for manufacturing of condensed milk, we had to see that the collector of that particular tehsil would open the plant, allow that plant to open, and that barrel should come to us. And I'm talking of now paper from Tetra Pak, to pouch granules from which coming from Reliance and several factories, to many other things. I mean, every single ingredient which goes in packing of our products, the raw materials, all were actually with the support of the government. The factories were opened up, they were allowed to keep laborers, manufacture the products, so that the supply chain of Amul is uninterrupted. So this is what the resilience of the system came into place. More out of an economic necessity, but also with the purpose to see that the producer doesn't suffer out of this, and the consumers benefit, and the trust they have in Amul should not be at any given time be let down. So this is the spirit at which the entire organization worked. I'm happy that I was a part of this, and there was not a single day work from home for me for this last 2 years and more, because Anand is a small place and we can afford to go to office every day without any disturbance. But here, because we had a digital visibility of the entire supply chain, I mean, we could sitting from a distance, we could watch, because every single transaction of this 300 lakh liters of milk happens on a common platform. So we knew in which village, which farmer poured what quantity of milk. In fact, we handled more milk than before. So while companies were shutting down and zero production plants, we were working at 120% of our capacity. Because hotels, restaurants, unorganized sector was closed. And those farmers had no option but to supply milk somewhere. And the Amul cooperative, which was working, got this milk. So rather than working at lower capacities and trying to think, we were working at excess capacities. We created inventories in our system, which is equivalent to the total stock of dairy commodities in Europe at that given point of time. I just put a number to it, about a year and a half back, just after a year of pandemic, Europe had a total stock which is public stock of 3 lakh tons of dairy commodities. And here only in India, Amul, which is this group of 18 dairy district unions, we had more than 3 lakh tons of stocks. Okay. So while the zeal was to see that the consumers are service the market, we grew our business also in a way, but the inventory is there because more milk came into the system than what was planned for. So for there also we worked on different ways to sell these products, export the commodities and surplus items, and we also made bigger business out of it. So that is the another dimension of how converting a crisis into an opportunity, building a larger market share, building more trust of our vendor supply chain partners, of our farmers, of our consumers, and also growing the business. So sir, these are just the opening things, and we will discuss part of the things related to communication or things related to people and the processes in the subsequent. Thank you, sir.
Phenomenal. I think the never like before crisis also required never like before kind of response. And very rightly that you pointed out, more monstrous the crisis, we had to take it by the horn. We need to respond to it more powerfully. It is famously talked about that India saw a V-shape or witnessed a V-shaped kind of recovery. That accelerated recovery that we are referring to, especially over past 12 to 18 months, and also kind of shared by the Chief Economic Advisor as well. What, according to you, were the enablers? So, Mr. Gill, if I can reach out to you first, because we are all very well aware of that, and perhaps this is more relevant to your industry as well. Digitization as such has accelerated growth. And also, when we talk about some of the industries, it required people to be locked inside their homes, and that is something which has led to a faster recovery of some of these businesses. If you can throw some light on what has led to the accelerated recovery path for some of the companies in your industry.
So I think, first and foremost, if you look at the performance of the stock markets in India vis-a-vis what's happening in other markets internationally, I don't think the decoupling of India has ever been more obvious than it currently is. So even though Europe has its set of problems, everybody says America has gone into recession. In India, even though the growth rates may be on a relative basis lower, but investors tend to be bullish, whether they're financial investors, whether they're strategic investors. And the reason for that very fundamentally is twofold. One is the fact that, it is still a very young population. It's a consuming economy. So what each of the three panelists said, and each of the stories I have to say were very inspiring for me to hear. It's a very large domestic economy. It's an economy which is not export-led. It is not dependent on international markets. As I said, that you have more than 50% of your population which is below 23 years of age, and so consumption becomes a very big driver for the recovery that we have seen. Now, the thing with respect to India has repeatedly been that we've had supply side constraints, whereas a lot of the Western markets have actually faced demand side constraints. And the reason that they have faced demand side constraints are those populations are aging, they're silvering, and obviously they are not consuming as much as they were in the past. Now, the beauty of the situation is that you can address supply side constraints, but you cannot address demand side constraints. You cannot artificially create demand. And Indian markets, have been very buoyant, very resilient, relative to what we are seeing in many of the Western economies. So just as what you saw when the financial crisis, global financial crisis happened, where the single biggest factor for survival and for growth became cost, that everybody was trying very hard to drive cost out of the system and become very lean and efficient. I think the mantra on the back of the pandemic, and which is part of your topic as well, is resilience. That how quickly can you, and how intrepid are you in terms of, and how flexible you are in terms of changing strategy, changing your growth metrics. There can be sudden demand destruction. Market dynamics can change. You can have a lockdown. I mean, there's no saying that it couldn't happen in the past. And companies which adapted quickly and were more flexible in their responses were the ones that came out of it. And came out of it in reasonable shape. The second reason why it's been a V-shaped recovery is the whole issue with respect to digitalization. I mean, it is quite interesting that India gets 2% of all the investment that comes into, the tech startups in Asia Pacific. Whereas if you see whether you look at UID, you look at UPI, and you look at so many other things which have happened on the digitalization side, I think India does not get enough credit for that. I mean, I think that what the government has been able to do with the India stack is absolutely outstanding. I think it's been unparalleled anywhere in the world. So when we talk about the India stack, for instance, I mean, look at China, which is a communist economy, where if you want to build a distribution network and you want to build the digital, the piping for the country, it is for the private sector to do it. India, in that sense, is a more liberal economy, is a democracy. And here, the entire plumbing for the country has been actually provided by the India stack. Through BharatNet, now you're able to connect with any part of the country, and data, information, money transfers, etc., fund transfers are now all enabled on the back of that. So, in many cases where the systems got broken because of lockdowns, because of shutdowns, etc., India has effectively not had any of those issues. And then the third thing, of course, is that India is a very sentiment-driven economy. When things turn negative, we are very quick to cut down cost, very cut down consumption, and discretionary spend disappears. And the moment the sun comes out shining, we get more optimistic and, we go back to spending. So you're seeing what's happening with the airlines, what's happening with the hotels, what's happening with restaurants, all the cloud kitchens that came up. And, on the back of digital, so many unicorns got set up in this country. So I think one, the pandemic taught us to be more entrepreneurial. Second is our level of digitalization became a very big competitive advantage. And the third thing is that given that we are a young economy, we're still consuming, we're still building infrastructure because the physical infrastructure is not there to the extent that we'd wanted. There is government spending happening. And I think these are the factors that have, resulted in this V-shaped recovery. And I think what India should feel very confident and optimistic about, as I said earlier, is that you can solve supply side constraints. You cannot solve for absence of demand. And India does not have that issue with respect to demand. So I actually feel that 2023, 24, 25, India will really come into its own economically ahead of any other country in the world.
I think that is a very well-placed optimism as well, that you are referring to 23, 24, 25 belongs to the to India. Now, since you have been talking about agility and flexibility, and that is something that we also heard in the opening remarks in the inaugural address as well, I would like to understand from you, Mr. Shukla, that when we are referring to agility, when we are referring to flexibility, how has it aided recovery in your case, in the businesses which are specifically in B2B? How has this agility, flexibility, what kind of approaches were taken, and how has it aided recovery in your case?
Yeah, so in last session I covered a little bit about what broader hits were and how did we cope up with that time. Just to give you a context and the scale of operation, that the kind of logistics operation we manage and the number of kilometers which we travel in a year are equivalent of going to moon 12 times and coming back. So, and every single truck had hundreds of permissions because it has to get out of the gate, the authority will not allow you. Then it has to reach to different tehsil area on the road, RTO will not allow you, the police will not allow you, and police might not even hear the driver and start beating before listening or seeing the documents. From those kind of challenges, for the mammoth size of fleet which we used to use, is actually it's not humanly, right? It's only by means of the courage you can manage such an operation, because nothing else was working. It was only human instinct which was present. There was nothing else which was there. Mr. Jayen talked about how his team was going into the market, and because milk is a perishable item and things like that. Similarly, the agriculture commodity which we manage, I am one of the largest commodity buyer in the country. The corn or the maize does not stop producing, or the crop does not stop growing. My team had to go and do the crop surveys, understand when to do. So for me and my team, life was as it is with several added complexities. I had to deliver, because if plants have to run, it does not matter how the material will come. And why we took 4 months, we are also 100% capacity utilized all throughout. Why we took 4 months is because our customers, these permissions, so if we are sending material to Amul, and we do, and we'll talk about Mr. Jayen separately, but all these customers who were working or catering to essential commodities also needed to send letters, and we had to carry, each and every truck had to carry those letters along with administrative government letters and all of that. So I think I'm answering to you that we had to walk beyond the processes, defined processes or protocols, and go into a very unknown territory to make things happen. And I think that agility, because a lot of people were doing the job which they were not supposed to be doing, but they were doing because they were they wanted to be part of solution and not the problem. And hence, I think this is what we have been able to manage the logistics operations from. Now, shifting focus from logistics to consumer or customer, please note that the biggest happiness you would find on face of consumer or customer who's running the plant is when he's seeing material standing out of his gate. He knows that he can produce and he can service essential commodities or milk or any other commodities, like I talked about some. We have in my introduction of the company, we are 80-year-old company, works in 100 countries. We have a very standard protocol to manage or measure customer delight, or so we call it NPS, net present score. And we have a very quantified method and science to manage that. The global target of that index is 26. You know what is India today in our business? And that only single reason, the way we managed this 2 years, that differentiated good companies and not so good companies. We were always there. We were working 24/7. Our current score of NPS is 56. It's one of the best in global in the history of 80 years of our existence, right? So, these small things are extremely critical. NPS is not relevant to all of you, but it is just a testimony of the action which you take and the result which it creates on the face of people. And because nobody was supporting them, we got that. So, Dr. Sodhi again alluded to this point, that when there is a need, you identify that opportunity. When everywhere is doom and gloom, can you really show a bright face to customer that don't worry, I am there, I will manage it. My driver got beaten up, please make sure that you give me this 15 days of approval rather than just everyday approval. So I think that whole ecosystem of supply chain, which starts from getting the material into the plant, producing it, keeping the manpower ready, then arranging dispatches and reaching the customer, and then taking order, right? So I think this whole ecosystem which I was kind of managing started to create those small smileys on the face of customers every day, and it became much more than the dispatch. I could really see that happiness on people's emails and and they were really open to say that, yeah, we support it. So I think this is one area which led to the recovery, and it led to the recovery of overall India. And I won't touch upon more macroeconomy because Mr. Gill actually summarized it quite well from the overall enthusiasm which India is going through on supply side and demand side both. So I think that's fantastic. Digitization is another area which it came to our rescue. And digitalization is another jargon which people actually in India started from our personal life to professional life, all that journey, it pushed us into it. And when Indians gets into it, they get into it and become expert quite fast, right? Some they claim faster, some really reach faster expertise. So I think from that point of view, we created all alternate channels of talking, having Zoom calls or Teams calls. Right now it looks okay, but that day we found that a lot of manufacturing people who are process owners do not have laptops. So, and Dell and HP were not supplying us laptops. The waiting time is 6 months. What do? We said, okay, we have desktops. Take them home. We paid for their internet. We paid for that transport. So, the people policies came to our rescue. The digital came to our rescue. Similarly, being available was such a luxury for people that you say that you call me at 12 o'clock in the night because your plant is at shutdown. I am available as a leader or part of the leadership team. So my team is already available. We made a WhatsApp group which used to work thousands of messages because there was less emails, only WhatsApp was working. So we used this casual chat, friendly chat to a business purpose and to reach to customers. So I think it's overall efforts of these 4 or 5 things which led us to a faster recovery. And I say this recovery thing with a lot of caution because there are more connotations and more risks which we are able to identify as supply chain folks or as commodity folks in terms of energy or in terms of rest of the things. So I think I won't say recovery has happened. We are concluding that if there is a V-shaped recovery, I don't think we are going that path. The recovery is definitely there, good recovery. We have come out of the current crisis. We might get into another one if we don't play it right. And that's not that catastrophe, but still, because costs have gone up and it will make businesses unviable. And people today are happy that my plants are running, customer is getting what he wants, I am producing what customer wanted, so my capacity utilization is there. So business is back to normal. No, business is not back to normal because the bottom lines have gone for a toss, and hence COGS lines have to be looked into. Amul might not have this challenge because they have a reverse KPI, but most of the organizations exist to make profits so that they can invest back in people, in capability, in infrastructure, and all of that. So I think that cost element is something which I will leave it for now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I'm sure it is milestone by milestone. The recovery is that way. One of the major themes that came out from the previous speakers, along with agility and flexibility, is independent of whether there is a market or non-market shock that we are experiencing, the supplier, whether it is a farmer, he'll not or she'll not, they will not stop growing. Similarly, a milk animal will not stop giving milk. So it is something wherein the driver is also coming from the supply side, but it is very phenomenal how Amul over past 2 years has come out with new product launches. So if Mr. Mehta, you can touch a little bit around that particular part. So while Mr. Gill talked about that we do not have a constraint from demand side, that particular constraint is not there. We are a consuming economy, consumption-driven economy. So if you can talk a little bit about the innovation, the product level innovation that have gone into the new product launches and how it has aided your recovery if there were any hitch in terms of your business.
Okay, it's a good question because again here we sense the opportunity in this crisis because immunity became a buzzword. So when people realized immunity is a buzzword and you realize milk with haldi is a good immunity booster thing as much as many other things we were told and taught on WhatsApp, how do you build immunity? So the first thing we realized was, okay, let's get into this without waiting for the businesses to start open, reopen and all that stuff. You won't believe that, I mean, we got the designs of immunity haldi doodh, I mean, and then got it packed at a company which is a sister concern of our own by starting their manufacturing, packing it at Amul Dairy here in Anand. But the key ingredient which was missing was haldi. Okay. So haldi lahe kahan se? So we had to literally wait outside this Patanjali stores here and pick up those 25-50 gram sachets और 250 किलो पहली बार ऐसे इकट्ठा किया 10 दुकानों में घूम के and we put the first batch of Amul Haldi Doodh in the month of end of May, so to say, within 1 month of the pandemic. Then we did tulsi, then we did ginger, then we did ashwagandha, then we did amulani. I mean, a matter of 4 months, we launched minimum 6 to 8 different types of immunity boosting beverages. Okay. Simultaneously, same thing was converted into chocolates, which is had haldi and tulsi and ginger, and possibly ice cream also, and try to build on this immunity buzz which was there, and launching products when markets were shut down, in the sense that, I mean, Amul parlors were open, but general market was shut down, the industry was not there, and that's how we tried to create out of it, launched a set of products, particularly to ride on the immunity thing. And basically the purpose was not to sell haldi, tulsi, ginger, doodh, but also saying that milk is the most nutritious form. Milk has that natural ingredients which help you boost immunity, and anything of such ingredients you add with milk, you will give you that kind of a protection and help you overcome this crisis. So this is where the opportunity of communicating the right message to the customers, not just making business out of it, but communicating in the right way was the theme behind it. And as much as it was the communication through our sponsorship of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Just when this lockdown was announced, the government also announced that they are going to telecast Mahabharata and Ramayana on Doordarshan. We sense that there is a great opportunity in this, because those who have seen Ramayana and Mahabharata in the earlier avatars knew how powerful these serials are and what traction it has among the customers, and particularly we were very excited that there will be no other content being played there. Now Doordarshan is not a preferred channel in India. Birud pehla loko jota tha, હવે Doordarshan India માં નથી જોતા લોકો. But then we realized that if Mahabharata and Ramayana is coming, we should be sponsoring that. So we told Doordarshan that we want to sponsor this show. So Doordarshan had actually got the content free from the families of Ramanand Sagar, because the Prime Minister, which we later came to know, the Prime Minister personally requested that this content should be there, because during lockdown people will have nothing to do. So to take money or advertise or sponsor a show which was not paid for was a big concern for that, but we ensured that on day 1, Amul ads were there. We started sponsoring Ramayana and Mahabharata both, and got lot of commercial time, and the kind of viewership we got was huge. And 2 episodes of Ramayana every day, 2 episodes of Mahabharata every day. The TRP ratings were about 8 to 15 TVRs per episode. So charo add karo to 38 to 40 TVR per day. Everybody in the family, right from the grandchild to the grandfather, was watching it. Jaisa India ke itihas mein, what was happening 30 years back, it's never happened, because viewership is fragmented. But because nothing else was there and these 3 serials were there, a TVR of an IPL, Birud, is about 3.5 to 4. We got 10 times TVR of Ramayana and Mahabharata, of IPL on Ramayana and Mahabharata over the period of couple of months. So you can imagine, at a price which we paid, I don't want to disclose it here, though it's still unofficial, at 1/100th of a cost, of an IPL. The rate we paid for Mahabharat was 5,000 rupees per 10 seconds. Ramayana was 25,000 rupees per 10 seconds. IPL cost 10 to 15 lakh rupees per 10 seconds. And you can imagine, so 100x returns out of just a decision that we have to be on this show before anybody else does. So this is a kind of, again, the good part was you got the family audience together. And since we have at any given point of time 35 to 40 TVCs running, Amul Doodh Pita India, butter, cheese, ghee, ice cream and all that. But here, because every day people were consuming so much, that's repeating the same ads was actually not productive enough. And then we realized that people are missing that sense of good times of the past. So how do you do that in communication? So we revived our old ads of Amul, produced way back in 1960s to 1990s and got in as Amul Classics. Okay. Imagine the advertising agencies were not working. You had to produce and give material to Doordarshan for running it on the next day's show. Okay. So how do you do that? So we had again an Irman colleague who used to do our live bike rallies which we do. So we knew he had a studio, computer and a team available. We had digitized all these things as a part of our Amul.tv digital initiative. So we gave that material to him digitally. He mastered it, produced for Doordarshan. Doordarshan at times had to hire an ambulance to deliver this to the studio, the physical tapes and the other stuff. So these are the things which were done on the fly, and we released a record 188 Amul creatives over that period of Ramayana and Mahabharata and brought in that spirit of nostalgia, the good times, and how people released it. So we were buzzing on social media. That was another powerful thing because all those youth who were watching it were tweeting it, and suddenly the ratings and results started coming in. So this is how a positive set of communication actually revived the brand, strengthened the brand, and brought in the trust which is there, and obviously which we will repeat continuously for the times to come, because you don't get such an opportunity of reaching out to a large audience in such a continuous manner over a period of time, but meeting the purpose that this brand is standing with you. We are not just advertising on TV, we are also available on the ground, at a shop near you, like before, and still able to take care of your need, emotional need, which is more of nostalgia, thinking about good times and hoping that good times will also come. So this is where the trust comes in, and this is what we keep saying, that our currency, I mean, while we handle more milk and all that, our currency is not milk. Amul's currency is not milk, Amul currency is trust. And this is the trust, is it what the time you get, this is the time of crisis you get actually to demonstrate that how much we live up to these expectations. So the efficient working of the team, the entire processes that we had in the organization, and the honesty and integrity with which we delivered the benefits both from the producer to the consumer and vice versa, is what actually is how the recovery comes, the resilience comes. And sir, to just answer your point of demand side, point here is that once people, the pandemic came, before pandemic, people were used to buying loose milk, loose dahi, loose paneer, loose khoa, I mean, loose ghee, everything was okay. But with pandemic, people realized that we need to go for trusted packaged products. So this was a tectonic shift we are seeing in our business. People are converting from loose and unpackaged to packaged and branded. And within branded, it has to be a brand which is more trustworthy. So this is where we are actually seeing a bigger growth in business, a bigger recovery, a bigger jump, and a bigger opportunity also to take care of the future. Thank you.
Phenomenal. You covered agility, you covered communication, you covered procurement, you covered innovation, and most of that in a very condensed way. I think the kind of ads that you were talking about, which were run and telecasted at that time, it triggered a national nostalgia, which also led to business growth as well. I'll come to you, Mr. Parnerkar, to talk a little bit about what has triggered recovery in your case, because some bit of innovation, frozen food and other things. But beyond that, were there any other trigger that you identified, any driver for that?
Yeah, no, sure. And a very good point, I think, here from Mr. Mehta. You know, I think that period was such that there was some feel good which was so badly needed. And I think that was very well captured. See, I think I won't go into the macro side, but in this kind of recovery, what always happens is that there is a external side to it, which is not in your control, and things are happening, which in some ways are driving that recovery or could prove a challenge, and then some internal. So even if I leave out the macro thing, on the external front, the one thing which is very clearly that is happening in a post-COVID world is consumer behavior is changing. It has evolved. It has left some very permanent shifts in terms of be it what they consume, be it how they consume, where they shop, all of that, what also happened that as a result of a lot of this feel good and all the confidence building, once the lockdowns were lifted, there was a very strong pent up kind of a demand. That demand was, well, I'm watching myself these days in terms of there is a plethora of reunions, there is a plethora of celebration, as if, that the world is going to end tomorrow. People are meeting each other like, so vacations. So that, a lot of that demand, that pent up demand is also in some ways a shift from before. So some of it is temporary, but some of it is a shift from what were people's motivations earlier, what drove them in terms of their day-to-day consumption patterns, their social lives. So there has been some shift, many of which, at least in our industry, I could say, has aided that recovery. So the whole consumption on the move from, the loose, unhygienic to more hygienic packaged, I think that's a very big enabler, external enabler. The move to products which have more, where they trust the ingredients, I think no preservatives, less artificial. I think that's something that now people are realizing that in certain cases, like in especially frozen foods category, they can trust that. So that's also. And then the third point here in terms of external thing, and which is also, it might sound a little probably counterintuitive, but I have my, the change in waist size also to confirm for that during the COVID period, a lot of people were treating food as a comfort, this thing. So, it was comforting to have it in a home environment with the family together. And that also kind of the role of food in that setting as a providing comfort also kind of was a driver. On the internal though, from a company side, what enabled this, and I will talk just in two broad terms. One which is enough has been talked about, but I'll just add a couple of points there, which is on the people side, So I think on the people side, where it has left a strong imprint and what has also enabled recovery is that there is a belief now in people, because after when you go through this kind of a very traumatic or very deeply kind of impacting any event, but you come out of it, I think that has created a belief. So I think that belief in people after that initial shock also resulted in a lot of efforts which happened towards the, and the second which has happened, I believe and I hope that then continues, is the ability to unlearn and learn new things. So in many of our, let's say, business, so typically these businesses, we have people with long experiences, long tenures, there was a set way of doing things, but in a very short span of time, these external shocks, they led to and people were kind of earlier forced to, but then it became sort of a passion for them to now see that, okay, how can I do things differently? Can I use another channel? Can I use another distribution model? Can I use a different approach to doing a certain thing? So that's on the people side. And second, obviously on the technology side, which, and we have been able to successfully during and post-COVID period has seen the maximum amount of digital efforts going into operations or processes that were earlier either manual, didn't use, led to enough controls or visibilities in the system, have now, and I think overall that has improved our control over our value chain, our visibility of the entire value chain, which ultimately obviously gives a bigger kind of, drives the agenda of providing a better quality, better service to the end consumer. So I think that role of technology, the way it kind of shifted and adopted by the companies also has led to a lot of this recovery, not just externally, because these e-commerce platforms, etc., provided us that opportunity, but even internally, what we did as a company to change some of our processes led to that as well. And innovation is the other thing, but I think Mr. Mehta here has covered that very well. So, but that was the other thing which aided recovery in our case.
Thank you. I understand I was asked to stop at 1:30. I am already 2 minutes past that, but I'll again take liberty of 2 more minutes because we have anyways past 1:30. So 30 seconds to each one of you gentlemen to kind of help us understand that how this idea of growth is going to be looking like over next 1 decade or till the time we hit something very similar to this, a major shock. So how this idea of growth has changed, or how is it going to be looking any differently? Are we going to be looking at slightly different parameters of growth? Are we going to be slightly more pragmatic? Are we going to be slightly more cautious? So how is this idea of growth looking to you just in 30 seconds, very quickly? I'll start with you, Mr. Mehta, going to you, Mr. Shukla.
I think the companies, as he said in the initial remarks, with purpose, will find it easy to adapt to any changing circumstances and be very optimistic about it. So Amul, in our case, as a cooperative owned by 36 lakh farmers, the purpose is built in, and obviously such learnings would come in handy to grow with even more speed once a crisis comes. I am just reminded, Biru, this year, in 1992, when there was communal riots in Ahmedabad, we used to work in the market at 3 in the morning, supplying milk with just on a regular vehicle, put Amul milk for essential supplies. And we were not stopped by the army or any of the paramilitary forces. And we could see actual riots happening, and still the supply chain was resilient. So having seen those days to these days, I'm sure we are quite optimistic about that. If the trust of our producers and consumers sustain it, the growth will be there, and the growth will be actually bigger and faster in the times to come. Thank you.
So the new way of working, that phrase itself has to now evolve to say that that's the way of working now. So we have to adopt to that more quickly. There is tiredness setting it in the way in which personal life of people got intruded because we were working. So organizations have to adopt to the newer policies to make sure that work-life balance and the privacy of people is addressed, and a lot of communication started to happen, because a lot of our colleagues we were seeing after 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. So that human touch, how do we do that with hybrid model, is something which is now going to be. As far as new areas of innovations are concerned, as we were talking in earlier session, Mr. Mehta also pointed out that health becomes a critical factor, and in that, the young generation, I'm seeing a lot of people not getting excited, but they will get excited if I say that after this session there will be a mass selfie, right? So which means that there are newer ways of looking at things. So the old knowledge is becoming irrelevant very fast. So the people who adopt to new knowledge, new consumers, new customers will win. As company, we figured out that we are in a sunrise sector because we make a lot of high-end fibers and plant-based proteins and things like that. I think that's the way to go. A lot of these buzzwords are coming, and it's growing good. So I think the more you are listening with digital approach in it, you will be able to cater to the newer generation. Now people are not talking about Gen Z for that matter, right? They're talking about alpha generation, right? So they're talking about people who are right now in 5 and 10. I am very fortunate and happy that I don't have to deal with them professionally. because I handle and fail at my home any which ways. So I'm happy that I'm satisfied with Gen Z and they are doing good job for me. So I will end it here. But I think innovation, listening to new consumers, constantly evolving, and ultimately it's going to end at very simple word like agility. But that agility implementation is extremely difficult, because how do we make organization and its processes and its layers only working for a common subject or common theme is very critical. So I know 30 seconds I have taken more, but
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Pandey.
Yeah. So, just two quick thoughts actually, and one which could sound a little counterintuitive to what Prashant just mentioned about, the new knowledge aspect. I do believe, see, while that's true, but that's more on the how part. Paradoxically, the what, which is that what would matter going forward, will remain like almost, which was always very important, is what consumer or customer experience you're giving out there. So because in that sense, there have been consumer and customers now have been given multiple choices in the last 2-3 years. They've been exposed to different experiences. So how you and what kind of experience that you provide, and that it's truly world-class, best-in-class, will be a very key parameter. It's the how where I think there will be changes. Then how you drive that will drive the growth. And second point, a quick point there also is catching the rebound. Sometimes, and that we know, I think हमारी पुरानी wisdom भी कई बार ये कहती है, when things happen too much too fast, there has to be some sort of a rebound which happens. I think so companies must also be they should not just get swayed by the new fads or something new that's happening, and be able to then, consumers can fall back to a comfort of doing things the way they were doing earlier, and catching that rebound becomes very important as well. Having that agility and that insight generating mechanism to see that if that's happening, then also not just continue to get investments or focus behind the new fads. I think, yeah. But thanks.
Mr. Gill, closing remarks from you.
I would say three things effectively. First is that there will be newer areas of growth. So when we talk about growth, let's not just focus on traditional areas. So one example is the whole creator economy. Nobody talked about it till about a year back, but today 30% of the younger generation want to be content creators. So basically, anybody who creates digital content and monetizes that is part of the creator economy. And it's currently growing at a compounded annual growth rate of about 25-26%, and it could be a very big driver going forward. Second part I would say is that we talk about digitalization, not many of us really embrace it. I think the whole thing around data analytics will drive a lot. It will tell you about market trends. It will tell you about delivery systems. It will tell you about changing consumer behavior and patterns of that. And the final thing I will say, that this biggest thing that we can do as managers today is to invert the hierarchy, invert the management pyramids in our companies. We have to bring in more young people in leadership roles. The fact of the matter is that our generation does not treat technology as intuitively as the younger generation does. We are not so much in touch with social norms, social media, how that is beginning to change, again, consumption, how that is beginning to change content, and so on and so forth. So if you today see, so many of Bollywood's biggest movies are, bombing. And the reason again for that is that the kind of content that you want to go out and watch in theaters is going to be very different from what was doing well in the past. So I would say embrace change, but more importantly, embrace youth. They are going to be your single biggest drivers of growth. And so to that extent, even if it sounds contrived, bring in more young people into leadership positions. To that extent, I don't think experience will have the premium that it used to have in the past. We are moving into a world which is going to be very different, not based on things that were there in the past. And to that extent, we should temper our optimism about what a big role experience plays. I just think that younger people may be in a position to read the future a lot better. And if you can keep further and further making our more management structures more youthful, I think it will really make a big difference in our individual journeys as well as the overall growth of this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank all the panelists here for very insightful conversations. And when the practice is talking to practice, academia also tends to benefit. There's something that is always there for takeaway in terms of what we have heard here. With that, I thank you all and would like to close the panel discussion. Thank you everyone for your
And thanks to Professor for asking difficult questions as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, post this enriching panel discussion, it is time to honor our guest speakers for taking time from their busy schedule and enlightening us with their wisdom and experience. I would request Professor Satyendra to provide the guest with a token of appreciation. We would also like to thank Satyendra sir for effectively collating everyone's ideas and thoughts and turning it into a well-rounded discussion. So thanking all the speakers, guests and participants for gracing the event. I'm sure we have a lot of learnings that we've internalized today. So now we'll break for the lunch and we'll reconvene for the paper presentations which will be running parallel in the lecture halls and the Syndicate 2 and the conference hall of ETDC. So it will reconvene exactly at 2:30. There will be no further delay. And at 4:30, the plenary for the editors conclave will be there. So there will also be not any delay in that. So we'll reconvene for both these events at 2:30 and at 4:30. Thank you, everyone. Lunch is right outside